now, direct from his latest world tour, here's Mr. USO himself, Bob Hope.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really nice to be here. The reason I'm here, a few months ago, I got a call from a very nice lady, and she said, are you really Bob Hope? And I said, yes, darling. She said, well, Bob, do you still believe in free speech? I said, well, you bet I do. She said, well, you suppose you could come out to Michigan and give us one? Yes, but I tell you, the USO, my favorite travel agent, they over in Vietnam, of course, a lot of you guys might know this. All the guys over there, they used to just refer to me as USO Bob. Then the Viet Cong heard about it and they abbreviated it. They just call me USOB. Yes, but the first time I ever did a show for the military was in 1941. May 6th, down at March Field, that's out by Riverside, California. And at the time I was doing my radio show, the Pepsi radio show, and we took the show down there. There were 2,000 guys learning to be pilots for the Army Air Corps, no Air Force yet. And it was such a wonderful audience. I went back to Hollywood and talked to the sponsors, and I said, I really would like to start taking the show to a different military base every week, and we did. And then in 1942, they were just starting to get the USO together, and they sent us up to Alaska. Now, you guys who were around, the planes didn't have radar or radio contact, and they would look for that beacon that'd be coming up through the clouds, and the pilot would see that, and then he'd circle around until he came down and could get down below the clouds and see the field. Well, we flew up to Alaska. I had my gypsies, Francis Langford, Jerry Colonna, and Tony Lombardi. And we got up there, and the pilot was having a darn time. He'd see that beacon, but he couldn't get around it and find the airstrip. So I went up to the cockpit, and I said, I'm kind of nervous. I've only been up in a plane about 3 times. And he said, well, it's my first. Yes, I said, well, how come you're the only one with a parachute? He said, that's because they need me. So anyway, then in 1943, the USO really started to hit their stride. They sent us over to Northern Africa. And the first night, they had a stage about like this. It wasn't this high. And the sergeant, he said, Bob, he said, we dug some foxholes back here, so if we start to get a shelling during your show, you can all jump in the foxholes. Well, about the 3rd night, here come the Germans, and they started dropping everything they had on us. I looked around. The foxholes were all full. But there was a little tube under a road there, so I crawled in that, and when the shelling stopped, I was coming out, and I cut my ankle on a piece of metal that was sticking up, so they got a young man over to wrap it up for me. And I said, gee, doctor, I really appreciate it. You're doing a great job. He said, oh, Mr. Hope, I'm not really a doctor. I said, oh, well, you're a very well-trained medical corpsman then, aren't you? He said, no. I said, well, when you were in the States, did you work in the hospital? He said, no. I said, well, how in the heck did you get into this medical unit? He said, well, I was filling out my draft papers, and they wanted my former employer, and I put down Dr. Pepper. I always used to like to talk to the guys. One time this guy, I know he was pulling my leg because he said he was a paratrooper. I said, was that pretty exciting? He said, well, on my first jump, I jumped out and I pulled my ripcord and nothing happened. And I pulled the emergency chute, nothing happened. And I was falling and I was about 100 feet off the ground and I saw another guy coming up towards me. And as we passed in midair, I said, help, do you know anything about parachutes? He said, no, do you know anything about gas stoves? Well, since we're on the subject of flying, Rob, do you have my next song queued up? Come fly with me, okay? Sinatra couldn't be here, but he told me I could go ahead and sing his song. say, come fly with me, let's fly away. Come on, fly with me, take off in the blue. In Llama Land, there's a one-man band, he'll toot his flute for you. Come fly with me, let's take off in the blue. Once I get you up there, where the air is rarefied, we'll just glide, so starry-eyed. Once I get you up there, I'll be holding you so near. Baby, you may hear the angels cheer, 'cause we're together, weather-wise, it's such a lovely day. Just say the words, we'll meet the birds to Acapulco Bay. It's perfect for a flying honeymoon, they say. Come fly with me. Pack up, let's fly. We're flying, we're flying. Yes, sir. You know, a lot of people ask me if Crosby and I still play golf together. And I put it this way, would you play with somebody that's a real poor sport? That means they don't write down all the strokes on their card, and they kick the ball in the hole if you're not looking, and if they lose, lay right down on the green and throw a temper tantrum. Would you play with anybody like that? Neither will Crosby. Now, one time, Big and I were up in Denver, Colorado. There's a real tough course up there, so we went out on a Sunday morning, and Bing teed off, and he, like usually, sliced his ball and went over in the pine trees. I said, nobody around, Bing, I'll go help you find your ball. So we'd go over and start walking. He grabbed me by the arm and he said, hey, Bob, you almost fell in that hole. So we took our clubs and kind of pulled the branches back, and he was right. There was a hole about 8 feet across. And I said, wow, I wonder how deep that is. So Bing said, well, we'll throw something down there and listen and see how long it takes to the bottom. Well, we looked around, there was an old transmission laying there. So we got on each end of it, drug it over, threw it down the hole, and started to listen. And a goat came running right between us and jumped right down the hole. I thought, boy, that's really strange. And we kept listening. And then an old fella came out of the woods. He said, did you guys see my goat? I said, you know, I think we might have. We were standing here, and a goat ran right between us, jumped right down that hole. He said, oh, that's impossible. I had him chained to a transmission. Oh, yeah. But you know, people ask me about this special golf club. Actually, this particular club, it's made up of 3 of my favorite golf clubs. When I was down in Brazil, the Psychiatric Association gave me the head of this driver. It's made of Kopotiki wood. They were nuts about me. And then I went to Australia for 30 days, and the Law Enforcement Association gave me the kangaroo leather for the grip. And then I came back to the States, and I did a show in Washington, D.C. for the House of Representatives. They gave me the shaft. Oh, yeah, I tell you, D.C., that stands for damn confused. Oh, yeah. But you know, I did a lot of shows then with Bing in the road pictures, and then I did, well, first of all, I started out in vaudeville, and then we did the road pictures, and then about 1940, what was it, about 49, I did a movie with a beautiful young lady by the name of Jane Russell. It was called The Pale Face, and I thought sure I'd win Academy Award for that, and no, because I had a hit song in it I'm going to do, and didn't win the Academy Award. I hosted the Academy Award 16 times, but then the next year they did a sequel. They did The Son of Pale Face, And I thought sure I'd get the Academy Award that year. It starred Jane Russell and Roy Rogers and his horse Trigger. But one of us did get the Academy Award. It was Trigger for being the best animal actor. But right now I'd like to do that hit. It's called Buttons and Bows. Maestro, music please. Now east is east and west is west, and the wrong one I have chose. Let's go where they keep on wearing those frills and flowers and buttons and bows, rings and things and buttons and bows. Don't bury me on this prairie, take me where the cement grows. Let's move down to some small town where they love a gal by the cut of her clothes, and you'll stand out in buttons and bows. Well, I love you in buckskin, skirts that you've homespun, but I love you longer, stronger, dear, where your friends don't tote a gun. The bones denounce, the buckboard bounce, and the cactus hurts my toes. Let's vamoose where gals keep wearing those frills and flowers and linens that shows, and you'll stand out in buttons and bows. I give me Eastern trimming, for women are women, in high silk hose and peekaboo clothes, French perfume that rocks the room, and you're all mine in buttons and bows. Buttons and bows. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Well, I brought along some of my friends tonight, and I'm going to go back here to the trailer and see if any of them are ready, and we'll come out and do a little. And then at the end of the show, I'll be back with a very special tribute to all you wonderful veterans, especially saluting you, sir. Thank you. Take it away.
Next up, it is my pleasure to introduce our next performance, Canton native Grace Rabinski, singer-songwriter and recording artist, fresh off her performance from all the way over from across the street at our POW MIA ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to Grace.
All right, this first song I'm going to be doing is Fire and Rain by James Taylor. Yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. I walked out this morning, then I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. Sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend, but I always thought that I'd see you again. Won't you look down upon me, Jesus? You gotta help me make a stand. You just gotta see me. My body's aching and my time is at hand. I wanna make it any other way. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times Thank you. All right, this next song is Beatles. Yeah. We come on flat top, we come moving up slowly. We got juju out for you, one holy roller. He got head down to his knees. Got to be a joker, he just do what he please. Football, he got monkey finger, he shoot Coca-Cola, he say, I know you, you know me. One thing I can tell you is that you got to be free. Come together right now over me. Thank you. That song makes literally no sense. Just figured that out. All right, this last song I'm going to do is a Johnny Cash song. Here is Cry, Cry, Cry. question that I ask, I get a lie. For every lie you tell, you're gonna cry, cry, cry. When you think the love gets old, no one will care for you. Then you come back to me for a little love, that's true. I'll tell you no, and then you'll ask me why. Then I remind you all of this, you'll cry, cry, cry. You're gonna cry, 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 and you don't want me then. It'll hurt when you think of who you've been. You're gonna cry, cry, cry. Thank you, everybody.
Let's hear it again for Grace Rybinski. Thank you. Great voice. You know, Bob Hope made a lot of friends in the show business, and right now, here's America's favorite clown, Red Skelton.
Oh, thank you very much. It's so nice to be here, you know. Boy, it's really something, you know. I flew in on that new senior citizens airline. Oh, you haven't heard of it? Yeah, there's one of them going over now. Yeah, their motto is, you've seen us drive, now watch us fly. Yeah, and when we landed, boy, it was really something. We landed in Detroit, and it was a real rough landing, man. We skidded and we bounced and went side to side, and finally the pilot got the brakes on and he stopped, and the flight attendant came on the announcements, and she said, "We'd like to apologize for that rough landing, but it wasn't the pilot's fault, and it wasn't the co-pilot's fault. It was the asphalt." Well, it was really something, though. You know, I've been doing a lot of performances. When I landed in Detroit, that was really something. You know, thousands of people were running around there, you know, and they always see me and they stop me and they want my picture and my autograph, you know. So I thought maybe this time I can just sneak right through the crowd, boy. So I started out, I went about 50 or 60 feet, not a soul had recognized me. Then somebody yelled out, "Look over here, it's Red Skelton," and they all turned on me, you know. And they wanted the selfies that they take now and the autographs and everything. Held me up for almost an hour. Boy, was I embarrassed. I'm kind of sorry I yelled. But I've been doing a lot of performing in Las Vegas, you know. And the other morning I was staying up on the 11th floor, and I came down for breakfast. Well, the elevator was jam-packed, see? But we stopped on about the 4th floor, and a big heavy-set lady, she just pushed her way right in and smashed us all up against the walls. And she came on down, and when we got to the bottom, well, the doors opened, and she stepped off, and then she turned around and slapped me right in the face, and then walked away. I looked at everybody and I says, "Boy, she's sure rude, isn't she?" There was a little boy standing beside me, and he looked up and he said, "I thought so too, mister. That's why I pinched her." But I love working in Las Vegas because I like to go around, talk to people, you know. And this one day I was standing there, and a priest came up and introduced himself, and we started to talk. And he said, "You know, Red," he said, "Las Vegas has more Catholic churches per capita than any other city in America. And the people come from all over the world, you know, to gamble here in Las Vegas." And he said, "We find that a lot of these people, if they have a few chips left over, they didn't want to bother to cash them in, and they just throw them in the collection plate at Mass, see?" And so about at the end of the month, you know, the priests, they take those chips and we send them over to this one monastery, And the monks over there, they like to take those chips and they sort them out, which one goes to this casino, which one goes to that casino. And then those monks, they take them over and cash them in. We call those guys the chipmunks. You can tell that to your priest this Sunday. Anyway, one day after the show, I was standing, you know, some of you probably know I'm a painter too. I paint pictures of clowns because my father was a clown in the circus, and that's how I started too, you see. And one night after the show, this lady came up and she says, well, Mr. Skelton, she said, I have a question. She said, do you ever paint portraits? And I said, well, yes, on occasion I do paint portraits of people, you know. She says, well, I have a very special favor to ask. I want you to paint my portrait, but I'm going to pay you double your normal fee because it's very special to me, because I want you to paint me in the nude. I said, well, I don't know about that. I'll have to talk that over with my wife, you know. So she said, well, please do that because I really would like you to paint me in the nude. So I went home, and the next night after the show, here's that same lady. And she said, well, did you talk it over with your wife? Are you going to paint me in the nude? And I said, well, we think it'll be okay, and you are going to pay me double, right? She said, yes. I said, but I have one stipulation. I have to leave my socks on so I have something to wipe the brushes on. Oh, but my wife, she's such a lovely person, you know. We've been married a long time, and people say, what's your secret for such a long married life? And I said, well, twice a week we go out to eat at a very expensive, very, very nice, classy, high-class, expensive restaurant. I go on Tuesdays, she goes on Thursdays. Well, one night I came home from the studio, and she said, Red, she says, you know, the mall that just opened up down there, they got a new beauty parlor, and they're advertising a mud pack facial that they say will just take years off your looks, and it's kind of pricey, but I'd sure like to do it. So I gave her the extra money, and a couple of nights later when I came home, she's sitting there in the living room kind of posing, see? And I said, well, what is it, dear? She says, well, don't you notice? She says, I went down and got the mud pack facial. What do you think? I took another look, and I said, my goodness, I said, you look beautiful. You're the prettiest I've ever seen you look. I don't know when you've ever looked so good. And you know, folks, for about 4 days, she just was gorgeous, and then all the mud fell off. Oh yeah, Gertrude and Heathcliff, the seagulls, you know. This was back during World War II, and they're flying over the ocean, and Heathcliff says, oh, Gertrude, she said, yes. He said, you won't believe what I saw today. She said, he said, I saw a whale that fell in love with a submarine. She said, no, a whale fell in love with a submarine? How could you tell? He said, well, every time the submarine would shoot off a torpedo, the whale would pass out cigars. They're flying along, see, over Pismo Beach. A jet airplane went by, and Gertrude says, wow, did you see that? Heathcliff said, I most certainly did. She said, well, why don't you fly like that? He said, well, I would if my tail was on fire. Oh, another day, they're flying along, see, and he's kind of sober, and he says, Gertrude, I've got to have a word with you. She says, what's wrong? You act so serious. He said, well, I've been thinking it over, and I've been looking at our little boy, and I think that you've been unfaithful to me. She said, why do you say that? He said, well, I've been looking at our little boy, and he's pigeon-toed. Think about that on the way home. You'll get it. Junior, the mean widow kid, you know, he's a wonderful little boy, but sometimes he gets very ornery because he sees them like he calls them, and if he do it, then he gets a whooping you. So here he is, Junior, the mean widow kid. Oh boy, hello everybody. Look what I got for my birthday. Mommy and Daddy gave me a little piece of rope to play with, you know. I heard him talking the night before, and Daddy said to Mommy, he said, well, maybe if we give him enough rope, he'll hang himself. But I joined the Boy Scouts, you know, because they thought that'd make me a better little boy. But we were learning how to tie knots, you see. And so you take the rope and like that, and then you do the two ends. But then about that second lesson, I got into trouble, and they kicked me out of the Boy Scouts. So I just went over and put on my sister's dress and went to the Girl Scouts. That's the thing to do these days, I guess, you know. Anyway, they was learning to tie the same knots, and so you take the rope and you do that same trick again, and you do like that, and there you go, you got a square knot. Well, that lady doesn't believe it. I have to prove it to her. You can clap for that one. That's a good one, boy. Boy, it's really something, you know. I was walking down the street the other day, and I found an old cigar in the gutter. And I'm playing like a big shot, and I'm walking along. Then first I found some matches in the gutter, so I light that old cigar butt, and I'm smoking it. And I went into the library, and the librarian came over, and she says, Junior, do you want to get me into trouble? I said, I don't care. What time do you get off work? She wrote a note home to me, Mommy, and she said, you better take that little juvenile delinquencies and take him into Sunday school, because he's going to end up terrible, you know. So Sunday morning, Mommy dressed me all up and took me over to Sunday school. I went down in the basement. She went into the church, and when the church was out and Sunday school was over and I came out and I was holding me little bottom, she says, Junior, did you learn anything in there today? And I said, boy, I sure did learn something, Mommy. She said, what'd you learn? I said, I found out one thing. God's last name ain't damn it. But, you know, I get into all kinds of trouble in school, you know. One day I was sitting there and I'm just drawing a picture and trying to color in the lines and everything. And the teacher came over and she says, Junior, quit wiggling around in your seat. Just sit still. I said, I can't sit still. My bottom went to sleep. She said, oh, don't be silly. Your bottom can't go to sleep. I said, yes, it did. My little bottom went to sleep. The little girl behind me put her hand up. She says, Teacher, Junior's telling the truth. His bottom went to sleep. I heard it snore. Junior, the mean widow kid. And then, of course, there's the one and only country bumpkin, the one and only Clem Cadiddlehopper. Well, here I am. I wrote those lyrics. I don't know who wrote the words, but I wrote the lyrics, you know. Boy, it was really something. I was driving around this town. It's a beautiful little place. I thought maybe I'd buy a house here and find a pretty little girl, and we'd get married and have a little baby. It looked just like me. Well, I talked myself out of that one. No, you know, it's really something. I really don't believe in marriage, you know, because I really think that marriage is too much like gambling. And I don't like to play with people that cheat. That's why I gave up solitaire. But really, you know, I did get married when I was 21. I went to Las Vegas, you know, and I walked into this casino, and there was this tall, gorgeous blonde, and I put my arm around her, and I says, hello, beautiful. She slapped me right in the face, and a half an hour later, we went down the road to a wedding chapel and got married. Half an hour after that, we came back to the casino. I went over to a crap table and lost every dime I had. Never forget that night. I was slapped, trapped, and crapped all in 2 hours. But you know, it's really something. You know, I was actually drafted. You know, I didn't get in the service, so I can sympathize and thank all you veterans. You know, because you've served our country. And when I got drafted, I went down there and they said, take off all your clothes until I did. And then pretty soon they called me over and the doctor looked in my nose and my eyes and my ears and poked around on me. And then he said, lift up your left leg, and I did. And he said, now lift up your other leg, and I fell right on my back. He looked down, he said, how long you been having these dizzy spells? Anyway, then he told me, he said, oh, well, go over to that table over there, and that doctor over there will help you. So I went over to that doctor, and he said, you're Clem Cadiddle Hopper? I said, yes. He said, well, he took out a card, wrote my name on it. Then he took a big rubber stamp and he put a big 4 on it. I thought I knew what was coming. And then he took out another stamp and he stamped a big red E on it. I said, 4E, I've heard of 4F, but never 4E. What does the E stand for? He said, even. I said, what do you mean even? He said, even if we get invaded, don't come. Well, you've been a wonderful audience, you know, and by the way, we'll all be back tomorrow night, and be sure and stay around because my friend Bob Hope has a great big special closing tonight for all you veterans. And but right now, I'm going to go back and see if our next vaudeville guest is ready. And you know, my purpose in life as a clown has been to fill people's hearts with joy and a smile to their lips. And in the next few days, should you think of something I said tonight that brings joy to your heart and a smile to your lips, then my purpose in life as a clown will have been fulfilled. So thank you all very much. Good night, and may God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Red Skelton. Next up on stage, we have a brass quintet made up of local musicians volunteering their talent to honor our veterans. They are Jeff Kumpula, Chris Sutton, Paul Letterman, Megan Barnes, and Jeff Whitby. Let's give them a round of applause. Let's make them feel welcome. They're bringing up a lot of equipment. thank you to our brass quintet. Well, you never know who will show up to the Bob Hope Show. Here's the man who never passes the buck because the buck stops with him, Jack Benny.
Well, gee, it's a wonderful night in this wonderful town. You know, it reminds me an awful lot of Waukegan, Illinois, where I grew up. Because in Waukegan, they've been so nice to me. They put up a Jack Benny statue, a Jack Benny school, a performing arts center, and I still take the hometown paper out in California. And the other day, Rochester came running in. He said, "Look, boss, they're going to hold a Jack Benny look-alike contest." Well, I always like a little joke, so I said to Rochester, "Well, pack my things, get me a plane ticket. Next week I'll fly into Waukegan, enter the contest anonymously." I came in fourth. But while I was there, I did get to meet up with a lot of my old school friends. One of the fellas is president of the bank. And I went in to see him and he said, "Jack, the funniest thing happened." He said, "A fella broke out of our jail. He was running down the street, and when he came by my bank, there's a little tree out in front. He went over and broke a little limb off the tree, picked all the leaves off of it. Then he came in, walked up to the teller, pointed it at her, and said, 'Give me all your money, this is a stick-up.'" Well, she laughed in his face and said, "Well, you better try a different branch." But you know, out in Beverly Hills where I live, their crooks are really mean and tough. I was in the bank one day. They'd asked me to come in. They needed to borrow some money. And we were standing there, and there was a long line at the teller, but a fellow came in the front door with a mask and a gun, and he ran right up to the teller, threw down a bag, pointed the gun at her, and said, "All right, sister, fill up this bag with all the cash and make it snappy." And she did. But then he shot her. And then he turned to the first guy in line and said, "Did you see me rob this bank?" The guy said, "Yeah," and he shot him. Then he turned to the next guy and said, "Well, how about you, pal? Did you see me rob this bank?" The guy said, "Oh, no, but my wife did." Gee, I rented a car so I could drive from Detroit over here, and I was driving through town today, and all of a sudden the car in front of me just stopped dead still, and I hit my brakes, but I wasn't used to that car, and I slid up, and my front bumper just lightly tapped the back bumper of that car in front of me. Well, folks, the door flew open, and I promise you, this little man, he was no taller than that, jumped out. He came running back to me, screaming and shouting, and he said, "Mister, I want you to know one thing. I'm not happy." Well, I looked at him for a minute, and then I said, "Well, I give up. Which one are you?" I think it was grumpy. But anyway, since I was already in Chicago, I decided to go to the Wall Street over in New York and talk to some friends. I have a very good friend. He's a very famous, well-known CEO. That's Chief Embezzlement Officer. And he said, Jack, I know you like to make a lot of money, and there's a couple of companies that are merging now because of the economy, and they're going to do very well as a new company. It's a Smith & Wesson gun company, and they're merging with Victoria's Secret. And if you want to buy the stock, they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange under Titty Titty Bang Bang. So I bought the stock, and they're really doing well. And their first product that they came out with is a little silver handgun called the Congressman. And I said, for heaven's sakes, why in the world did you call it the Congressman? And they said, that's because it doesn't work and you can't fire it. But, oh, you know, a lot of people were wondering if I was going to be playing my violin tonight, and this is my Stradivarius. And the way you can tell if it's a genuine Stradivarius, when a fellow makes an instrument like this, he puts his name inside of it before he puts the top on. And if you read through this little F hole here, it says, made by Antonio Stradivarius, area code 594-738-9000. So I know it's a genuine Stradivarius. Well, right now, I'd like to play my theme song, Love in Bloom. Oh, for heaven's sakes, you know, I didn't know, it's the first time I've worn my new diamond ring. It's a 6-carat diamond, and these lights reflect right into it and were right in my eyes. I don't know if, the way I got this ring, there was a lady who lived down the block named Aunt Sarah. And every evening, if I was home, I'd take a walk, and if she was out on the porch, we'd sit and have a Coca-Cola or 7-Up and talk about the neighborhood news. And a few weeks ago, I got a call from the hospital, and they said, Jack, Aunt Sarah's in the hospital. She wants you to rush right over. So I went over, and the priest was out in the hall. He said, you better hurry right in, Jack. So I went in. She said, Jack, I'm glad you made it. She says, they're about to give me my last rites. And I have no family at all. And in fact, you're the only friend I have. So I want you to do me a big favor. As soon as they put me in the cold, cold ground, I want you to take this large cigar box full of cash that I've been saving, and I want you to rush out and buy the biggest, most beautiful stone you can find. And there it is, 6 carats. So, all right, here we go. Love in Bloom. Gee, that'd make a gypsy cry. When you're hot, you're hot. Charlie Daniels, eat your heart out. Big ending. Thank you very much. We're a little late, folks.
Thank you, Jack Benny. Next up, again, we have our brass quintet that's going to be playing our military songs. Thank you to the brass quintet. Now one of Bob's Hope best friends, who could always face Bob eye to eye and nose to nose, that well-dressed man about town, the one and only James Schnazzola Durante.
That's not my song. He's still playing Jack Benny's music. You folks will know my song when you hear it. There we go. Now, dink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a doo, a dink, a dink. Oh, what a now, dink. How about that band? Everybody put puts in wrong notes, I'll overlook it. Why don't you start that whole darn song at the beginning? No, not that. That's Bob Hope. Where it says Jimmy Durante. That's all right, forget about it. You know, folks, you got it? All right, we don't want to shortchange this crowd. Nope, that's not it. That's okay, Robert. Just find it later. Find it where it says closing, and we'll do that at the end. But first, let me tell my jokes. You know, folks, people are always asking me for advice. Why, the other day, a lady came tracing me down the street. Mr. Durante, Mr. Durante. I said, what's your problem? She says, every night when my husband comes home from work, he runs upstairs, fills up the bathtub, gets out his fishing pole, and all night long he's fishing in the bathtub. I said, why don't you take him to one of them psychiatrists? She said, I ain't got no time. I'm too busy cleaning fish. Oh, yeah. You know, way back a long, long time ago, they put me in the Navy. Why, the first day on the ship, I walked up to the captain. I said, hey, Captain, I'm going to go downstairs and get a sandwich. You want to come along? He grabbed me by the collar. He said, look, big nose. He said, you're in the Navy now. He said, it's not downstairs. You say I'm going to go below deck. And furthermore, that's aft, and that's forward, and that's starboard port, and port. And he said, and if you make any stupid remarks like that again, I'm going to grab you and shove you right through one of those, you know, those little round windows over there. Yeah, but I gotta tell you, I was on a trip to Ireland recently. That's right. I went over to Ireland and I rented a car in Dublin and I drove all over the countryside. Next thing I know, it was starting to get dark and I didn't know if I could find my way back. So I pulled into a little town. There was a fella standing there. I pulled up and I said, sir, I just wondered, you got any restaurants in this little town? He said, yeah, we got two. One on that side, one on that side. I said, well, which one would you recommend? He says, well, I'll put it this way. No matter which one you go to, you're going to say, I should have gone to the other place. So I drove through town and I saw a little 3-story inn. So I thought, well, I'll just spend the night here. So I went in and checked in, got a nice room, but it looked like rain, but I did want to go out and get some food. So I put my hand out the window to see if it was raining. Something fell right into my hand. I couldn't believe it. I looked up and on the 3rd floor, there was a lady looking down at me. She said, sir, I dropped something. Did you happen to catch it? I said, I bet I did. She said, would you please bring it up to me? So I climbed up 3 flights of stairs. She's standing out in the hall. I walked over and put my hand out to her. I said, is this what you dropped? She said, oh, yes, it is. And she grabbed it, popped it back in. It was her glass eye. Yeah. I said, well, I'm glad I could be of help. She said, wait a minute. I want to show you my thanks, my gratitude. I just bought a bottle of good Irish whiskey today. Come in and we'll have a little thank you toast. So I went in, and I said I wouldn't hurt. So we went in and had a nice little thank you toast, maybe 2 or 3. And then I said, well, I got to get down to my room, and then I got to go out and find this restaurant and get something to eat. She said, wait a minute. I just made a nice pot of Irish stew. You can stay and eat with me. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt. So we went in and had a nice supper. And then I said, I really do have to get back down to my room. She said, well, I tell you what, I'm alone and you're alone. Why don't you stay and have a little visit? And maybe I could even put on a record and we'll have a little dance. I said, well, I guess it wouldn't hurt. So we went in and talked for a minute or two. Then she jumps up, went over, put on a nice Glenn Miller record. She walks over to me, pressed her body against mine, put her arms around my neck, blew in my ear, puckered up to give me a great big kiss. I said, wait a minute. Do you treat every strange man this way the first time you meet him? She said, only the ones that catch my eye. So anyway, you know, have you folks ever had nightmares? I tell you, I had the worst nightmare the other night. I couldn't believe it. It took me back to my old days of vaudeville when I had an act. It was Clayton Jackson and Durante. I was the piano player. Jackson was the singer. Clayton was the dancer. We played all over the country in vaudeville houses. Well, in this dream, we were sitting in a bar and all the other guys were talking about going duck hunting. Well, we'd never been duck hunting. So we said, well, let's get some decoys and the dogs and we'll go duck hunting this weekend. So we went out to the river, took a barrel of Guinness. By the end of the day, the sun was starting to go down. We hadn't got a single duck. I said to the fellas, why do you suppose we're not getting any of these ducks that fly over? Jackson said, well, we're probably not throwing the dogs up high enough. That was for George over there. So anyway, then we loaded up the old pickup truck and we started back to town. And in this terrible, terrible nightmare, a semi-truck was coming around a curve and we were up on a high mountain and he blew his horn and we went right over down onto the rocks. All three of us stone cold dead. Immediately, we ends up at the pearly gates. St. Peter said, why don't you boys come right in? We said, well, what are your rules here in heaven? He said, well, for you three boys, only one rule. Never step on a duck. We said, what does that mean? He said, you'll find out soon enough. We goes in, there's ducks every place. Hadn't been there 2 minutes till poor old Clayton stepped on a mallard. That duck started to make a fuss. We looked up and here came a guardian angel. Folks, let me tell you, he had the ugliest woman we'd ever seen. In fact, when she was on Earth, if she went to the zoo, she needed 2 tickets. One to get in and one to get out. Well, Jackson and I got as far away from those other 2 as we could. And it wasn't too much longer till old Jackson steps on a duck. Here comes that same guardian angel. A woman that was twice as ugly as the first one. Tell you how ugly she was, she had long curly red hair all down her back. None on her head, just down her back. He handcuffed them together and says, that's your fate for stepping on a duck. Well, I got so far away from them, I couldn't believe it. And it seemed like months and months in Earth time that I kept those ducks away from me. And I had a perfect record, but one day I hear a sound, I look up, what do you know, there's that same guardian angel. He's coming at me. But this time, let me tell you folks, he had the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She was tall, thin, perfectly proportioned, cute little dimple in her chin, beautiful teeth, sparkly eyes, beautiful hair. He handcuffed us together and walked away and says, that's your fate for eternity. I looked at her and I said, boy, oh boy, what in the world do you suppose I could have done to deserve someone like you? She says, I don't know about you, but I stepped on a damn duck. Well, folks, it's time for my theme song. So, Michael, Robert, or Michael, or Dick, or Tom, Ted, anybody. Now once upon a time they played that vodeo-do, but that was long ago. Then everybody started into poop-poopy-doo, but they got tired of that, you know. How about those guys? Everybody's putting in extra notes. Durante will ignore it. But the tune for you and me is that swinging symphony. Ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do, a dink, a dee. Oh, what a tune for crooning. Now ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do, a dink, a dee. They got the whole world spooning. Those Eskimo bells up in Iceland, they're ringing. They made their own paradise land singing. Ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do, a dink, a dee simply means ink. A dink, a do, a dink, a dee. One more time just for the fun of it. Ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do. Ah, let me hear that choir. Just like the Tabernacle Choir. Ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do, a dink, a dee. Let me hear that band. Just like Guy Lumbago. Now let me hear that trumpet. That's not a trumpet. That's not a trumpet. Now that's a trumpet. Ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do, a dink, a dee. You know where I got that high note, folks? I got that note from Elvis Presley. Boy, was he glad to get rid of it. Ink, a dink, a dink, a dink, a do, a dink, a dee simply means ink. A dink, a do, a dink, a dee. Yes, and now it's time for my theme song, folks. Hang on, here it comes. That's it. Good night, good night, good night. It's time to say good night, good night. Good night, folks, and good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are. Yeah. And in just a few minutes, my friend Bob Hope will be out with his USO tribute to our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durante. And now we have our brass quintet out here one more time. Let's welcome them. Thank you so much to the Brass Quintet, Jeff Kumpela, Chris Sutton, Paul Letterman, Megan Barnes, and Jeff Whitby. Great job. Okay, well, he's back, so let's welcome once again the man with the long drive and a short putter, Bob Hope.
Yes, what a wonderful night this is. It really is. That pretty moon up there. What is that star up there next to that? Oh, I thought it was. Yeah. Okay. You know what's funny? The moon looks just about the same over in Vietnam, doesn't it? On certain days of the month. Anyway, when I was over there, you know, I always used to like to bring along Miss America, Miss USA, Miss World, some of these pretty beauty gals. Raquel Welch would go over with me, and I always used to love to have these beautiful women along. And one year I thought, I'm going to change it around a little bit. I'm going to take Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. And he was pretty high rank, outranked most of the guys that were over there, and they were all kind of in awe of him. But there was a story that I'd heard about. They said, you know, when he got out of the capsule on the moon, Neil said, small step for man, a giant leap for mankind. And that saying went all over the world still today. But when he was getting back into the capsule to come back to Earth, only the guys in Houston that had the headphones on, they heard him say, "Good luck, Mr. Gorski." Yeah, they really did. And they wondered, who in the devil is Gorski? Was he a Russian cosmonaut or what? They never heard anybody like that. So one night after the show, Les Brown, my band leader, and I, and Neil, we were knocking back a couple, and I said, Neil, I says, you know, you've been asked this question at press conferences a lot, and you never answer this, so I'd kind of like to know, who in the devil is Mr. Gorski? He said, well, Bob, they're both gone now, Mr. and Mrs. Gorski, but when I was a kid, they were our neighbors. And one day, my brother and I were out playing ball, and my brother threw a ball, and I couldn't reach it. It went over my head, and it landed under their bedroom window. And I went over there to pick it up, and I heard them fighting. They were having a terrible fight. And it stuck in my mind all these years. And Mrs. Gorski was yelling, and she says, sex, sex, sex. You'll get sex when the kid next door walks on the moon. True story, I swear. True story. Yeah. And of course, I always had a lot of fun playing golf. During World War II, I played with Ike Eisenhower. And then when he became president, I would go to the White House and we'd play golf, and I'd always let him win. And I'd pay off my bet, and then he'd make me sign an unconditional surrender. And of course, I played golf with Jerry Ford. Jerry was a wonderful golf partner, but I always called Jerry the hitman for the PGA, because at a tournament, Jerry would always tee off and he'd hit somebody over on the side. They'd have to call for medical help. So after a while, I got it down to whenever I played golf with President Ford in our foursome, it was the president, myself, a paramedic, and a faith healer. And that worked out pretty good. And of course, I always liked to play golf with another Californian president. That was Nixon, Richard Nixon. And we'd go to the White House quite often, my wife Dolores and I, and we'd stay at the White House. Well, one weekend we showed up, and the press secretary met us, and he says, Bob, Dolores, President Nixon says you shouldn't probably stay at the White House this weekend. They're having a little political row, something about a Watergate something. But he said, we checked, and the Watergate seems to have a lot of vacancies this weekend. So we reserved a room for you. So the presidential chauffeur took us over and we checked in. And Dolores says, Bob, she says, you know, I hear they've been recording people's conversations and there might be a microphone hidden here. I said, nah, Doris, don't worry about that. They're not recording us. She said, well, would you check it out? So I looked behind the phone and the flower pots and the picture frames and the towels and the water pitchers. And I said, there's no microphone here. She says, but Bob, there's a little rug in the middle of the floor. Maybe it's under there. So I pulled it back and there was a little metal plate about 10 inches square. She says, I'll bet it's under there, Bob. So I carry a little screwdriver with me. So I undid the screws, lifted up the plate. There was just a hole in the floor about 4 inches in diameter. And I said, no microphones. I put it all back in place. And the next morning when I went down to check out, the young man says, Mr. Hope, was everything okay in your room last night? I said, it was a wonderful night. We had loved the room. He said, wow, is that a relief? I said, why do you say it like that, son? He said, well, the room below you was a honeymoon couple, and the chandelier fell on them. Here's a song Tony Orlando loaned to me. We did this for the POWs when they came back. I'm coming home, I've done my time. Now I've gotta know what is that isn't mine. If you receive my letter telling you I'd soon be free, then you know just what to do if you still want me. Now if you still want me, help me sing it right here. Just tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree. It's been 3 long years. Honey, do you still want me? If I don't see a ribbon round the old oak tree, I'll stay on the bus, forget about us, put the blame on me. If I don't see that yellow ribbon round the old oak tree. Bus driver, please wait for me, 'cause I couldn't bear to see what I might see. I'm really still in prison, and my love holds the key. Simple yellow ribbon is what I need to set me free. So I wrote and told her, please, here we go. Just tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree. It's been 3 long years. Do you still want me? If I don't see a ribbon round the old oak tree, I'll stay on the bus, forget about us, put the blame on me. If I don't see that yellow ribbon round the old oak tree. Now the whole darn bus is cheering. Oh, you can do better than that. Now the whole damn bus is cheering now. Yay! Can't believe that I'm free. 100 yellow ribbons round the old oak tree. Yes, sir, bus driver, look at that old oak tree up there. Look at all those ribbons on it. You can let me off right there. I'm home. Yes, sir. Okay, well, I'd like to do a little medley of some of the old USO songs that we used to do back in World War II. So, Maestro, you can let those 3 just play right through. As soon as you're ready, you got it. This is the Army, Mr. Jones. No fancy cars or telephones. You've had your breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore. Then for all the guys and gals that flew the planes, this was their favorite. There's one up there. Coming in on a wing and a prayer. Coming in on a wing and a prayer. With one motor gone, still we'll carry on. Coming in on a wing and a prayer. Now out in Hollywood, Betty Davis, a well-known actress, started a special thing for the troops. It's called the Stage Door Canteen, and the stars would come down and serve them coffee and donuts. And it wasn't for the officers, just the enlisted guys. And then Irving Berlin put this in his song, The Stage Door Canteen. I left my heart at the stage door canteen. I left it there with a girl named Eileen. I kept her serving donuts till all she had were gone. I kept on dunking donuts till she caught on. I'm going back to the Army routine. And every soldier boy knows what that means. A soldier boy without a heart has two strikes on him from the start, and my heart's at the stage door canteen. Yes, I want to tell you folks, this Eileen, she was the cutest little thing. Had dimple in her chin, a pretty smile, sparkly eyes. I proposed to her about 4 times that week on furlough, and she said, "Oh, Bob, there's a lot of guys ahead of you." I kept her serving donuts till all she had were gone. I kept on dunking donuts till she caught on. I'm going back to the Army routine. And every soldier boy knows what that means. A soldier boy without a heart has 2 strikes on him from the start, and my heart's at the stage door canteen. Yes, sir, Eileen, I'm going to come back next furlough and propose to you all over again. Hope you'll wait for me, darling. Yes, thank you so much. I have something special right now. A few years ago, I ran into this and rewrote it. And I want to dedicate this. I know Ted had all the veterans stand up earlier, so I won't ask you to stand up again. Just everybody, the veterans or their families, give them all a big hand. Thank them for everything. This is a narration called "What is a Veteran?" They look the world in the eye and they feel an extra heart tug when the flag goes by. They step a little faster when listening to the beat of a military band. They're veterans. They come in all assorted sizes, men and women. They're big, small, short and tall. The G.I. Janes and G.I. Joes, they're veterans. They're sailors, wave, soldiers, wax, Air Corps, Marines, Seabees, WASPs, Coast Guard and Merchant Marine, they're veterans. They have the quiet dignity of people who know the price of freedom. Their courage living on Main Street. Their patriotism mowing the lawn and washing windows on Saturday afternoon. They're the symbol of good citizenship. They're veterans. They're parents, grandparents, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends. They love peace because they know the price tag of war. They're members of history's most exclusive club. They've been there. They're veterans. They love the majesty of America's mountains, the tranquility of America's valleys. They like the bustle of America's cities and the friendliness of America's small towns. They listen joyfully to the sound of America's children enjoying their playgrounds. They love to see the flag and honor the sound of a bugler playing taps. They're citizen soldiers, peacetime leaders, the first to volunteer in time of trouble and the last to come home. They're veterans. They're proud of our American past, alert to our present and confident of the American future. They honor America's legends, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Patton, MacArthur, Eisenhower, and all the patriots who have marched through America's history books. They stormed the sands of Guadalcanal and swarmed ashore at Omaha Beach, trudged through Korea and slugged it out in the jungles of Vietnam, and wasted their way through the deserts. They're veterans. In the very depth of their secret hearts is always a tinge of sorrow, a souvenir of sadness for lost departed comrades. No matter how gray their hair may turn, no matter how many years have been added, they always walk with a distinctive pride. Their freedom with a purple heart. They're America's most honored citizens. They are veterans. Thank you, and God bless you all. God bless America. Well, thank you so much. Well, it's theme song time, folks. If you come back tomorrow night, we'll do it all over again. Yes, thanks for the memory, for candlelight and wine, castles on the Rhine, Parthenon and moments on the Hudson River line. I thank you so much. Yes, thanks for the memory, for sunbirds on the shore and nights in Singapore. All the road pictures with Bing and Dorothy Lamour. How lovely it was. Many's the times that we feasted, and many's the times that we fasted. Gee, it was swell while it lasted. We sure had fun and no harm done. Yes, thanks for the memory. And strictly ingenue, darling, how are you? How are all your little dreams that never did come true? Awfully glad I met you. Cheerio and toodaloo. And thank you. Yes, thank you very much, folks. God bless America. Good night. If any of you want a picture or something, I'm going to come down here to the front. Take it away, Ted.
Wasn't that great? Thank you, Mr. Hope, Mr. Benny, Mr. Skelton, Mr. Durante, and all of our other performers tonight. Once again, we'd like to thank you for coming out tonight and thank our sponsors. Masco is our presenting sponsor and Alpha USA who sponsored. Thank you very much and good night.